Right then, time to try this again. So, for anyone that's watching this in the future, welcome. There's nobody in chat yet, but who knows, that could change. So, for anyone that saw the other video, I attempted to do this a couple of nights ago. It didn't work. What happened was Björn and I spent best part of 3 hours debugging a cause issue. And it turned out that despite following the documentation to the letter, happy, the Node.js framework was anything but. It made me very sad. The cause documentation, which I don't think the documentation was on the official website. It was what we found on Stack Overflow and elsewhere. But following all the advice just didn't work. So after I got off the stream, I tried using Express, and that worked. So I'm going to try the same thing with Express. But if you didn't see the video the other night, you'll be wondering what the hell is he talking about. So I'll explain what I'm doing. Tonight I'm going to try, and probably fail again, to build my very first Twitch extension. So one of the things I enjoy doing, other than Twitch streaming my live coding experience to no one in particular, is writing articles on Medium. So I noticed on my Twitch channel, if I go to my Twitch channel, this is going to be weird because I'm going to see myself, twitch.tv/redgreenrefactor. So when I go here, first thing I'm going to do is mute myself before I start getting feedback. If it ever loads. So mute there. So I've got a list of recent tweets, but I'd like to have a list of recent articles that I've written. So with that in mind, I'm going to try and write a fairly simple extension that's just going to go and grab the articles from the RSS feed on the Medium website, and then display those somehow. So before I get started, I'm going to make sure my phone is on airplane mode, because seeing that I have so very many friends, I'm sure they'll all be calling me and say, "Hey, aren't you that famous guy off the internet?" So first thing I'm going to do is, first thing I've already done is downloaded the Twitch developer rig. So you can get this from the Twitch website. They've got some fairly good developer documentation, and it's basically an environment for running your extension in a fairly similar kind of environment to how it will run when it runs natively. So when it runs in your Twitch channel, it's inside of an iframe, and there's a couple of other scripts and so on that it uses. So this will just kind of run that for you. And then you can also run the back end. I didn't really see a lot of benefit to running the back end via here, other than, I guess, having one place to run it all. You can also run the back end, if you have one, in just your normal terminal. So to begin with, though, I'll just demonstrate how we create our first extension. I'm not going to actually create the project here. Suffice it to say, it is quite easy. Once you've downloaded the developer rig and you've logged in, you can just hit add project and go to create project up here. My experience with this has been that it's got a couple of rough edges that could do with being smoothed off. Overall, the experience is really good, but I found that if I wanted to create a new extension and use a name that I'd used previously, it just wouldn't let me, but it didn't give me any error to that effect. So I mean, if I try creating a new extension now and call it foobar, I think it'll work. I hope. Hit panel. And then when I hit next there, nothing happening. You can briefly see the cursor change, but that's just because the button's disabled. But then it's not giving me any feedback as to why that's not working. Now, I haven't had a project called foobar. I'm not sure why that one's failing. Maybe I have to have other views. I'm not entirely sure. So there definitely are some rough edges on this, but I did, when I first downloaded it, manage to create a few projects. So maybe the naming thing wasn't the problem, but yeah. So rather than trying to create a brand new project, I'm going to use one that I created earlier, but I've deleted all of the code off of, and hopefully I can manage to get it all working again. So once you've created your project, it'll open up in this tab at the top with the name of it. You've got a few things down the left here. The only two that we're going to be covering tonight are the project details and extension views. So the project details is where you'll set up things like where is the source located, and so the project folder here at the top, which you set when you create the project anyway. So I've got mine in my workspace folder and Medium latest articles, and then within that folder, where will it find your front-end files and where will it find your back-end files? And additionally, you can provide commands for how to host the front end or host the back end as well. So the front end by default, so there's three different ways you can create the project. There's a Hello World sample application that they use in the tutorial. There's a React boilerplate that you can get, and there's a standard boilerplate that you can also get. I've gone with the standard boilerplate because it's got basically nothing. If I look in Visual Studio Code, all I've got here is a wife sat next to me playing Hearthstone. All I've got is a config file that has a few things. I haven't really gone through this in detail. One of the things it does set in here is the URL for the various HTML files that it expects to find. So at a minimum, you need a panel view. So for what I'm creating, which is a panel, obviously we just saw previously, when you create a new project, a new extension, you've got 4 different extension types that you can create. I went with panel because it's an extension that will run outside of my actual stream and just be on my channel. That panel will remain there when I'm offline as well. But you can create extensions for running inside of your stream as well. So for the panel one, what you need at a minimum is you need 2 HTML files. One for the panel itself. This is what users will see when they come to your channel, and then you'll get the config view, which is what the content creator will see when they add the extension to their channel. And this would be for any settings that they need to provide. Tonight I'm just going to hard code all my settings. I will create the config panel just to show that it works, but I won't be doing anything with it. So I'm going to hard code the extension just to go to my my RSS feed on Medium and pull in the latest articles. I'm sure that'll be a useful extension for everyone. I'm sure every Twitch stream would quite like to show my latest blog articles on there. That would certainly help my blog. But later on, maybe we'll configure that so that you can set the URL yourself, or set the name of the author yourself. I'm going to take a very brief pause there to enjoy my upside down half tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream provided by my Hearthstone playing wife. That's what you need, is a Twitch stream where you get to watch me eating ice cream. Also, pro life tip for you, pro hack for you, is if you have to share a tub of Ben & Jerry's with someone, the easiest way to do it is to saw it in half with a large serrated knife and eat upside down. And I specifically asked for the upside down top half of the ice cream tub just so I could demonstrate how amazing this is. My wife is looking at me skeptically like, people don't care about your ice cream. That's fine, they don't have to care about my ice cream. I'm going to tell them anyway. So let's start by creating our first panel. So when we created the when I previously created the boilerplate extension, the project, I got something approximating this. I don't know how much of that has changed when I've been tweaking the settings in the developer rig, but it comes with this default of looking for panel.html and config.html. So I'm going to have one project for my front and back end. Seems pretty sensible. So I'll start by creating a UI folder, and I'll create an API folder as well. Whoops, put it in the wrong folder. Curse you, Visual Studio Code, not letting me. Can I do that? Move API intermediate. That's what I wanted to do. So now I've got two separate folders at the top level, and inside of UI, let's create a new folder in there. I'm going to put it as source, and then inside of there we'll create panel.html. So I'm just going to start off with some boilerplate HTML and just say hello world, if I can spell world. Save that. And back in the developer rig, I've already configured this, but because my base path is this medium latest articles, which is the folder I've opened up in Visual Studio Code, I then need to give it the location of the where my panel.html is going to be. So I put it in UI source. Now, if I run the front end, what that's basically going to do is spin up I assume it's using something like Nginx. I don't know whether that's Nginx or Nginx. Answers on a postcard, but it's going to spin up a local server and serve up my HTML. So I expect to see panel.html be available on localhost 8080, given that that's what the config is expecting. So if I hit run front end, I could go into, so first thing it's going to do is show me the logs for the front end. So it's showing me network requests and so on. So if I go to, I'm still on my Twitch channel there, that was weird. If I just open up a new tab and go to localhost 8080, slash panel.html. Well, I was wrong about that, so that one doesn't work. What you can do though is in the developer rig itself, you create an extension view. I'm going to delete these ones just so I can show you the process of recreating them. I should have sanitized all of this before I started. So the extension views are basically just ways for you to see the fruit of your labor. So if I create a new view just called main, this is going to be the panel view as opposed to the config view. And I'm going to leave everything else at the default settings and hit save. If I now hit refresh on there, so I remember what went wrong here. So what it doesn't have, and this is in the documentation somewhere on the Twitch developer website, is there's a script that needs to be included. So Twitch developer documentation. Now I did this the other night and I couldn't find it. I ended up pulling it out of somewhere else. So let's see if I can find it tonight. I don't want to log in, I just want to see the documentation. But presumably it's going to ask me to log in. No, I don't have to, that's good. So somewhere in here, extensions, getting started, and I had exactly the same problem because I was on a stream and trying to do this quickly. I could not find the JavaScript that I was supposed to add in. Let's see. So somewhere in here, and I think I mentioned this at the time, it feels like this ought to be slightly more obvious. It should kind of bring it up front and center, because certainly when you're starting out, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I figured, so this JavaScript that you have to import is kind of described as being necessary for doing things like authentication. Now it may, given my propensity for not properly reading documentation, it might be that it also calls out the fact that you need to have it full stop just to make it work. but I couldn't. There we go. That's the bit I'm looking for. So yeah, extension helper library, but you actually, yeah, you need this in your page in order for the even the simplest extension to work. So if I copy that, so it's sourcing this straight from the Twitch website. And like I say, this is mostly for interacting with the API to do things like authentication, but presumably this is also just needed just to work with the iframe or whatever. So with that in my super simple panel.html, if I go back here and hit refresh, I should see hello world. There we go. Takes a second to pop up. So there you have it. You've now got a Twitch extension. Not a very useful one, but we'll get to that. I'm going to be right back, and we'll go on to part 2. Okay, and I'm back. So really, that be right back break was just so I could eat ice cream, and tweet about the fact that about the fact that I was eating ice cream. I just can't get through it fast enough. It's gonna melt. Not my proudest moment, but it is tasty. So we're gonna get some data in here. So the URL where I'm going to get my data from, let's not start with that actually. Let's start with just putting any old data on there. So what I want to do is put the data in, I pull it out of an API. So because I'm going to be hitting the RSS feed on Medium, I'm pretty sure if I try and do that, you know what? I'm not sure if it's going to work. I'm going to try using something called RSS parser. I kind of feel like cause shouldn't be an issue for using like an RSS feed, but maybe I'm wrong. Actually, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's keep it nice and simple, because I want to make something that's going to be fairly universally useful, and not everyone's going to be consuming an RSS feed. I imagine if anyone actually finds this educationally beneficial, you're probably getting your data from just an API somewhere. So let's use that same pattern and grab our data from an API. So I'm going to start by creating in my API folder. Let's actually go into the API folder. Oh, I'm already in the API folder. Wait a second. Oh, I'm in the API folder that I had previously, and I've moved it to the bin. Let's go to the workspace folder. And what I call it again, Medium latest articles list. Okay, API and UI. Go into API, and in there, nothing. That's what I expected. Okay, so if I were to now npm init, I'm just going to go with all the defaults. I don't advise that you do this. You should probably give it a better name. You should give it the right version number, but this is just a tutorial, so you don't really want to watch me inputting all that info. So with my npm init, I've now got a package.json. I can now start install. I could install dependencies without having a package.json, but I want to save them so that I can blap my node modules folder at any point I choose on a whim, and delete my package lock, and then just reinstall everything. That fixes about 99% of npm related issues anyway. So what am I going to need? I'm going to need Express for one. So let's have Express. I'm going to be writing everything in TypeScript rather than JavaScript, because everybody loves TypeScript. So I'm going to use TS Node. If you haven't come across TS Node, if you've just been writing TypeScript and then compiling it, if you're writing Node scripts, either just hacking scripts together, or you're writing an application that's using Express or Happy or something else, TS Node is really, really handy, because you don't have to have your Webpack to compile it all and then serve it out of the dist folder. You can just run the TypeScript as if it was running natively, and all TS Node is basically doing is wrapping up the TypeScript compiler with Node and passing the output of the compiler to Node, which works really well. So I'm going to install those two. There's probably something else I'm going to need there. In fact, I'm going to need RSS parser. So I'm going to install that now. So I think it's RSS parser. That's not a dev dependency, actually. I should be putting these as real dependencies, not dev dependencies. Easiest way to do that is to go into here and just change that to dependencies. So Express is definitely a dependency. RSS parser is a dependency, and given that I've just discussed how I'm going to be serving it up, TS Node is also a regular dependency as well. So I'm going to add a start script here, and that start script is just going to be TS Node API.ts. So I haven't created API.ts yet, you may have noticed, so let's create that. API.ts. And just to test that everything works correctly, let's do console.log API. Save that. npm run start. And with any luck, it won't work. Why didn't it work? Can't find modules TypeScript. I always do this. So I installed TS Node, but TypeScript is a peer dependency, not a dependency of TS Node. So npm install save TypeScript. It's funny that I know the shorthand for save dev, but not the shorthand for save. Apparently, 4 characters is okay, but 7, 8 characters with save dev is not okay, so I have to reduce that one down to 1. Who knows? So let's try running that again. Start. And it worked. API! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! That's. Let me just checking something else here. Make sure I'm doing everything okay. Yep. So we've got our API. Let's make that an Express server. So this is where my knowledge of Express is going to fail me, because I'm pretty sure every time I've had to set up an Express server in the past, I've just used the documentation of Express. So let's go and do the same thing now. Setting up a new Express. Was setting up a new email account is a popular search phrase, I guess. Setting up a new Express server. Now I'm pretty much going to be copy pasting code here. Most of the code that I ever put in my applications gets copy pasted from Stack Overflow. Thank you, Stack Overflow. This isn't what I want. I just want the getting started actually. From Express.js. There we go. Express Hello World example. This is exactly what I want. So I'm just going to grab all of this and paste it in here. So this is, oh, that's a require. We don't want to require. Let's convert that to an import. Okay. So we've got we import the Express library. We call Express. It's not instantiated because it's not newing it up. So you call Express to get your app. And then you add routes to that app with app.get or app.post or whatever. And then for each one you get a request and a response. The response is used to send data back to the client. So super simple. Turns out I didn't really need to read the documentation for that, but it's probably quicker to copy paste it anyway. And I'm going to change that from example app to just calling it my Medium Articles API. I was going to give it a cooler name, but Medium Articles API listening on port 3000. Okay, save that. So let's make sure that that works. So let's npm run start. And what did I lose now? We express.1 default is not a function. Okay, that's funny because it just automatically changed that for me. I'm not going to spend too long debugging that. Let's just copy all of that and go back to the require. Whoops. Wait, does it need to be newed up then? Maybe that's what's missing. New Express? Nope. Let's go into there and find out what that is. At least I would. Oh, I need to install the types. That would certainly help me. So TypeScript is currently not giving me any help really with this because it doesn't have any types for Express. So npm install save dev. Now this is definitely a dev dependency at types / express. And while that's installing, I'll get another mouthful of this sweet ice cream. Okay, anything in here? It's still not updated, but let's try now. Clicking through to there, and what does Express give us? Export equals e. E is a function, so it seems to me that should work. Let's try running that again. Now that I've got the types, I don't know if that's going to affect it. Not at all. course it's not. Wait, no. This module is declared using with import export equals and can only be used with a default import when using the ES module interop flag. Let's go and that's another thing I'm missing. So because I'm using TypeScript, I need to add a tsconfig. Easiest way to do that is to init a new TypeScript project. So in my API, I'm going to run npx, not npx run, npx, maybe it is npx run tsc -- init. So npx, in case you're not familiar with it, is just an npm based tool to give you an error, module not found. No, that's not what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to give you the ability to run modules that are in your current node modules folder, rather than having to install them globally. So let's find out why that's not running. Found can't find module. API TSC. Oh, because of course, because I haven't installed a TSC in here. I don't really need to install TSC actually, now that I think of it, because not at least in this project. TSC is generally going to be installed globally, and I'm literally using it to set up a tsconfig. After which I won't need TSC as part of the project. So what I'm going to do instead is just tsc -- init. And successfully created a tsconfig file. Looks super easy. So let's close all those node modules. tsconfig. So we'll notice here that ES module interop is set to true by default. So when I save that and then run the start script again, this time, yay, it's successfully running on port 3000. So if I now go to localhost 3000, and see I did this before, I get hello world. So far, so good. So what do I need to do next? I need to have a drink while I think about what I'm going to do next. Okay, I know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to put any old JSON in there, because what I want to test is that I can parse that JSON and do whatever with it. Should I put any old JSON in, or should I actually grab the data from? It's going to be quite easy to grab the data from the RSS feed. So let's just jump straight to that part. So if I go to medium.com, oops, me has a sneaking suspicion that my wife is stealing my Dr. Pepper. It's okay because she got it for me. RSS / Mallorik. Now I believe this is going to give me my RSS feed. No, it's not. Let's find out what that was. So medium.com app. Oh, is it because I'm Mallorik85? Oh, it's because it's at Mallorik. That's why. Nope, that's not working either. Is it feed at Mallorik? I should probably have bookmarked it. There we go. It's feed / Mallorik, not RSS / Mallorik. At Mallorik. So this is the RSS feed that I'm going to be using. Great thing about this being an RSS feed, no authentication required. I do kind of feel like sometimes we get a little bit overcomplicated with APIs and so on, where we end up having to. Well, maybe not. I'm saying we, like every developer does it, but I certainly find that a lot of the APIs I end up having to interact with require authentication. And a lot of the time they don't really need it, not for data that is otherwise freely available. So I'm going to paste that in here somewhere as a URL. Let's make this a proper function instead of a shorthand. And given that we're using TypeScript, actually let's add some types to this. So that is a request, which is from there we are, from Express, and this is a type response, also from Express. Let's find the right one. That's the one. Okay. Given that we're not currently using request, if you stick an underscore in front, it'll stop complaining about that. So let's get the URL. So const RSS URL equals, I hope I put that in quotes. Okay, so I've got my RSS feed URL. I'm going to use RSS parser, which I think I already installed. So RSS parser. I have to remember what I have to import. The great thing about TypeScript is you spend a lot less time reading documentation, because I spend a lot less time reading documentation because I just rely on the type checking to tell me what I can do rather than having to go and read about it. It's not necessarily the best thing to be doing. Maybe I should be reading more documentation, but oh well, nobody's perfect. So what have I got in here? Nothing. Probably don't have the types for it for a start. So let's open up a new terminal. npm install developer dependency at types /rss -parser. Okay. I didn't find any types. Oh, I remember. Wait, do I remember? No, I don't know. I don't remember. Types RSS parser. Maybe we don't have any. Let's just go and Google that. RSS parser type definitions. Unless it's already written in TypeScript, in which case we don't need separate type definitions because they'll be provided. Would you look at that? Already included. Okay, so with that in mind, well, since I'm already on that page, let's go and have a very, very quick look at the usage. So it's got a default export, which is a class, and then I need to instantiate that class and then use that parser to parse a URL. Super simple. It's also got a parse string, but given that I'm just grabbing this from a URL, parsing that into a JSON object, I don't need to do that. So this is one of the reasons why I don't like default exports, actually. I can see why they're really useful in the require world, where or not so much the require world, but in the ES5 world, when you didn't have the destructuring with curly brackets like this, because then if you wanted, if it was a named export on RSS parser, then you would have to do let parser equals require RSS parser dot parser, and if you've got a lot of arguments, having to then put dot property name after can get quite tiresome. But certainly with ES6 and with destructuring, that's less of an issue. So I tend to avoid default exports wherever I can. I like named exports, partly because it means you spend less time. So I've worked on a couple of projects where the same variable is used all throughout the code base, but it's called foobar in one place, and it's called foobar2 in another place, and it's called something completely different elsewhere. It just introduces consistency if you've got named exports. Obviously you can rename them, but you generally don't. So yeah, and it also means that if you don't know what the thing is that you're looking for, you can use destructuring to just not control space, control dot or command dot, to get predictions there on what it is that exports. But anyway, that's a big aside. So I've got my parser there. I will instantiate the parser, I guess at the top here. There's only one endpoint, right? So, but it makes sense that I would instantiate the parser at the top outside of any given route and use the same parser wherever it's needed. So equals new parser. Oop. Pardon me, all that Dr. Pepper. Okay, so now I can get the JSON. So let JSON. Wait, why am I doing let? I'm not going to be modifying this. Const JSON equals parser dot parse URL RSS URL. Okay, so what does that return us? That returns us, I think, a promise. Yeah, a promise of type parser dot output. So I'm going to use async await rather than getting into lots of nested promises, and we're going to say is await parse URL. So what does that give me? JSON dot brilliant. So I get the whole output there. So if I then just res.send the JSON, and then I need to go back to my other terminal. I seem to have a one terminal up in here as well. That's from again from a previous project. Let's go to workspace. What am I doing? Workspace, medium, latest articles, UI. That's in there. Okay, good. There's not much going on there. So back to the API side. So I need to stop and start this so that my changes will show up. Listening on port 3000. So if I now go back to was it here, port 3000, and refresh, and voila, I've now got an endpoint that's going to give me all of the articles that I need for the front end. So that's all the work I'm going to do on the back end. That's hopefully quite familiar for anyone who's set up an API with Express before. And in fact, really everything I'm going to show you on the front end should be quite familiar as well, because we've already kind of covered where the magic bit happens, right? The config that you get out of the developer rig that tells it where to go and find this stuff. Now, I'll warn you now in case you're waiting until the end where you're going to see me actually upload this to Twitch and use it. I haven't done that yet. I'll be happy tonight if we get to the stage of having an extension that's going to display my Medium articles, and then I'll figure out how I actually get that onto Twitch at a later stage. Ideally not with an audience of millions watching me. So let's close the API. Let's close the package.json for the API. So we've got our panel there. So the UI, I'm going to leave the API running in here. So you can, as I said before, you can actually run that via the developer rig. I don't see a lot of benefit in doing that, so I'm just going to leave it running in my terminal here. This is where I would expect to go and look at any output rather than having to swipe over to this window, which will then display the backend output as well. I'm just going to leave that for the front end. So let's go to our first terminal, and in the UI folder, I need to do an npm init as well. So I already did that for the back end, but I want package.json here. I should probably do this one level higher up and just have a shared node modules folder, but I'm going to treat them as kind of two separate projects, even though they would probably be under the same Git repo realistically. So I've now got a package.json. So let's install a few things. What am I going to need? Well, I know I'm going to need Webpack at some point, because I plan on writing my JavaScript as TypeScript and then compiling it. Now, Webpack isn't a prerequisite to compiling a TypeScript. It's just a commonly used tool for doing that using the TS loader. That's what I've chosen to do tonight. I want to get better at setting up a TypeScript config from scratch, and just doing it through repetition is going to help me get there. So let's install TypeScript Webpack and the TS loader, which I'm going to need for Webpack. And I think, off the top of my head, I think those are the only dependencies I'm going to need. I'll probably be proved wrong in about 2 minutes when I run into a dependency that I don't have. But in the meantime, I'm going to open up my UI folder, and in source I'm going to create my first JavaScript file, TypeScript file, not JavaScript. So let's call it main.ts. Oh goodness, while I was doing that it changed focus and it's just now called main. Let's not save that, let's rename that now, main.ts. Okay, so in main.ts, just to test that to test that it all works, we're gonna let's make something that's more visible on how it works. So what I'm going to have is on the front end, I'm going to just create a pre-tag for now. Short for pre-formatted, so anything that's got indentation and so on in here is all preserved, and it spits it out in plain looking kind of console type font. Quite useful for displaying JSON data, for example. So what do I want to put in there? For now I'm just going to put loading ... because what I intend to do is replace the output of this, or replace the contents of this with the output of my API call. So that's what I'm going to do here. So let's create an init function, const init equals empty function, and then call init. This function is going to be asynchronous because I am oops, that's not where I put it. Because I am almost certainly going to be making, well, I'm certainly going to be making calls to the back end using something like fetch. So let's start with that. Let's do a fetch. The URL that I need to hit is I'm going to put it in a variable, actually, const API URL, or actually no, get posts URL equals, and let's go and grab that. It was localhost 3000, wasn't it? In fact, I'm going to change that to get posts. At the moment, that's not going to do anything. Let's go back to my API. Rather than having that on the root, I prefer that was actually a proper named endpoint for that illustrates its purpose. And we'll stop and start the back end as well, just to make sure that's going to work. Let's go over here, refresh, and there we go. Good. Okay, so the get post URL is that. Oops, get posts. I suppose realistically what I ought to have, this is massively over engineering it, but let's do const base URL equals localhost 3000. And then get post URLs, get posts, fetch. We're going to include the base URL and the get posts URL. Get post URL is kind of pointless at that point. I'm just going to do get posts. Okay, so fetch base URL / get posts, and then when I get data back, I'm just going to give it a type any because I don't have an interface for that type, and I don't want to create one just yet because I'm lazy, I guess. So let's do. So I can already remember now. I'm going to get a cause issue here, but I'm not going to jump ahead to that just yet. So that data that comes back. In fact, let's give that a fetch data. Let's let it implicitly type that, because actually I think TypeScript might be clever enough to work out the correct type, or at least a better type than any. Speaking of which, I need to initialize the TypeScript in here as well, so I'm going to do tsc init just to get that running. So I need to add a few things into my lib property in my tsconfig. So I know I'm going to need DOM, and I know I'm going to need ES2015. So let's save those. Okay, so data is type any. Yeah, okay, so it doesn't know what that type is. So let's give that a proper type. I say a proper type. Let's give it a type of any. And then let's do. So I want to set output data.json. What we'll do is actually take that out of there. Const JSON equals. I don't know why I'm just saying what I'm typing out, because you can see what I'm typing out presumably. I don't think I'm going to have many blind people watching the stream, because it's a live coding stream. It would be, unless you just like the sound of my voice, and I don't even like the sound of my voice. So const JSON equals JSON.stringify data.json null for, and all that's going to do is kind of pretty print the JSON into a string that is indented, each new line indented by 4 additional spaces. So that's not entirely what it does, but hopefully you'll see what I mean. So let's create that set output function. So const set output equals JSON, which is going to be of type string, returning nothing, and I don't think I actually need to put that void in, really, given that I know, well, TypeScript will know that it returns nothing because I'm not going to return anything. So we're going to do document.getElementById. So we want to get the output, the pre-tag that we've got, and set the inner HTML to what have we provided. So call it JSON. Let's actually change that, because we don't. That function doesn't really know that it's going to get JSON. It's just going to get some data, I guess. Call it data. Data's a terrible name for it, but okay, that's fine. Okay, left hand side of my sound. Oh, right. Okay, that's complaining about. It's automatically added this question mark here because document.getElementById can return null as a value, and then I'm trying to then access a property on there called inner HTML. I don't want to assume that that's going to be null. I want to assume that it's always not going to be null, so use an exclamation mark instead. That way it would throw an error if this does return null, but that's no worse than we would be in a purely JavaScript world. Data void has no properties in common with type request in it. So, oh, that's I'm being an idiot. It's so fetch doesn't accept callback. Fetch returns you a promise, which then so what I'm going to do is, since I've made this function asynchronous, I'm going to actually use that. Let or const data equals await fetch, and everything's frozen. Not everything's frozen. There we go. So await fetch, and then everything else at least can go on without any indentation. Hallelujah. Okay, so we get the posts, we turn it into JSON, and we indent it. Let's make that slightly more verbose. We'll call that, yeah, we'll call it JSON. Actually, oh god, I just literally had it as JSON. So I'm going to put that here. And we're going to rename this one to output. At least I tried to rename it to output. There you go. Okay, so it's a little bit more verbose now, but hopefully quite clear. So, now in theory that would work, but I know I'm going to get a cause issue, and then I'm going to have to go up and look up how to fix that cause issue in Express. But let's go and actually just refresh here. Oh wait, so what am I doing? There's a few things I'm missing. Firstly, I've written TypeScript. I haven't written JavaScript, so I've got to compile that JavaScript. And secondly, I need to include that JavaScript in my page. So the simplest way for me to compile that now is just to hit TSC and give it the path that I want to compile. Now I've got main.ts, but actually I'm gonna set up Webpack because I want to practice Webpack. So we're going to create a webpack.config.js. I'm not sure if I can make this one as TypeScript. I would have to manually compile that, or compile it through some other means in order for it to be usable. So I'm going to just create it as JS. Module.export equals, and then my new TypeScript config file. not type. So this is where I'm going to now find webpack config documentation, and we're just going to cross-reference that. If you're ever using a library like Webpack, go and read the documentation, even if you're only skimming through it like I do, because it will just save you a lot of hassle if you spend a lot of time looking at kind of guides and tutorials on how to do Webpack, or you try to reverse engineer someone else's project that's used it before. You just spend a lot more time than you ought to. If you just actually looked at the documentation, you usually get a list of all the things that it's capable of. So mode we're going to set to development, because by default it'll be in production mode, but that will run ever so slightly slower. Not that we're going to be iterating often enough for that to be too much of an issue, but we'll go with development. It's easy to change later. Entry point. So entry point is going to be that main file. So we're going to do ./source/main.js, and then we've got output. So output is an object. Output is an object, and we want to give it a file name and a public path as well. So the path is just going to be straight back into the source folder, I think. Sorry, it's not the public path, it's the path here. So by default, this is already set to dist, but we don't want to set it to dist. We want to just set it to source, because so that's a folder relative to the package.json, well, not the package.json, but relative to where Webpack was executed from, where the output's going to be dumped. So we want to just dump it in the source folder for now. There's almost certainly a better way to set all this up, but it's nice and quick. And then the file name that will generate, let's just generate it as main.js, or we'll do it as bundle.js, because who knows, maybe we'll further down the line, maybe not today or perhaps tomorrow, we'll have more JavaScript files and we'll want to compile them all into one output. So I forgot what it was called now. I'm talking too much. File name. So we'll call that bundle.js. So that's not quite enough yet to compile our JavaScript, because we need to now include some modules, or module. We need to include some rules. So for the module, we're going to have a single rule. Which is that an array? I'm pretty sure that's an array. Yeah, an array of objects. So first object, we're going to test for anything that matches .ts and end of string. And then once we tested that, we use a series of loaders. We're only going to have one loader, but it's still an array. I think you can use just like TS loader like that. That is one of the nice things about JavaScript as opposed to TypeScript, where actually you can do this with TypeScript as well. But the nice thing about JavaScript is just being able to, if it makes sense to just have a string rather than an object, then you can just provide the string, providing it's set up to handle that. So, but you can do the same thing with TypeScript using union types. So anyway, so we're going to try just with the TS loader like that. I think that's sufficient. So let's just, before we do anything else, add something in here. So I guess if we call this start as well, even though it's not really a start because the developer rig is doing our start, let's call it build watch, just to make it a little bit more descriptive about what it's doing. And we're going to run Webpack with the watch flag. So if I run npm run build watch, do I want to install Webpack CLI? Yes, I do. First time I've run it for this project, so this should be quite quick. And it didn't work. Module not found. Webpack CLI. Can't find module Webpack CLI. Do I need to try installing the Webpack CLI? Is it because yeah, okay, let's try. npm install save, not save, dev Webpack CLI. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Maybe I need the CLI. Oh my god, I've still got ice cream, although it's not really, there's not much ice left, it's just cream. Okay, that's installed. So let's try running that build again. Okay, getting closer, we got a new error. Cannot resolve source in the UI folder. Really? UI source. That's a funny one. Users Malloc workspace medium late start equals UI. Let's have a look at our Webpack config. Figure out why it doesn't like that. Path.resolve, directory name, source. Oh. There? No, it should just be source. Oh. Maybe it's that it couldn't find source main.js because it's .ts it should be. Let's try that. No, okay, still doesn't like that. Hold up, what does the entry look like in the documentation? So entry /app entry. Default to source, the application starts executing, website starts building. So they don't have a name of a folder, sorry, name of a file on there. Fairly sure that's supposed to work. Development. Is it because I'm running it from the wrong folder? No. No, I don't think it is. UI contains a source folder. Let's try getting rid of that, just see what happens. The mode option's been set. Oh, has not been set. Wait a second. What do you mean the mode option has not been set? Mode option's definitely been set right there. So that makes me think that... Oh, insufficient number of arguments or no entry found. Oh, because I didn't tell it what to... I've definitely gotten something wrong there then, so let's undo that, save that. Oh, well, there's one thing we're missing. The path library hasn't been imported here, so that might be what we're missing, because we're using it here to resolve the current directory name. It still doesn't like that. What if I just ran that from here? Webpack --watch. Yep, it still doesn't like it there. So it's not to do with running through the npm. Oh, hold up. That Webpack config is in the wrong place. So relative to that, so now that's interesting. So where I was running it from the UI folder, it was still picking up the Webpack config inside of source, because otherwise how is it getting /source? It's interesting. So okay, now it's picking up, oh, because that was the default actually. Okay, so main.js, that should now be main.ts, and at that point we should be gravy. I'm just going to change that back to the npm command, and Webpack is watching the files and has just built them. We can now see we've got bundle.js, super. So if I now go back to here, and I can include that script, I'm going to include it at the bottom of my file because I haven't put any kind of document.ready on there. So script source equals bundle.js, and save that, and that should be it. So if I go back to here now and refresh this, now I expect this not to work because of the aforementioned cause issue. Now here I do get some output because I can I get the output in here, but that's just the network panel. It's not actually giving me any kind of debugging capability. So it's just as easy to open that in a browser of your choice. So the easiest way to do that is to click on this ... and hit view in browser. Now that's opening it up in Safari, which I prefer not to do my debugging in Safari. I much prefer the developer tools in Chrome. So I'm just going to copy the URL and pop it into Chrome here. Let's close some of these tabs so that and open that. So localhost 54099. So if I hit F12 and get my developer tools up, you can see here I'm getting a cause policy error. So I don't have a no access control allow origin header on the requested resource. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Express to my API and add that middleware. So I can't remember exactly what I need to add for that. I basically need to do like an app.use. I think let's see if I can write it without without having to look anything up. See what I remember. App.use and then TypeScript's letting me down. It's not giving me anything. Damn. So there's something. Oh, there we go. Request. So we get the request in. Oops. I'll type request. What do I get next? Oh, the response. Okay, and then next. Okay. Response, which is a type response, and then next, which is that's effectively going to be a function. I'm just going to call it as any. Okay, so so what I need to do is request.header.add, or is it headers.add, .push, .something. What is headers? Request.headers is incoming HTTP headers. It's not really the request though, is it? Is it the response that I need to do on response headers sent? Let's quickly look it up because that's the quickest way to get all this stuff done. So we've got express cause. There we go. I obviously googled this before. Express cause middleware. Let's go here. See what we've got here. App.use request result response next. Res.header. Okay, so it's a function for setting the headers. I see. So let's just copy those. So this is just writing a middleware to set any given headers. Now the address that we want to allow is just star to let anything access this from another domain. So if I save that, I'm going to have to stop and start it. Before I do, I'm just going to do that so I know that request isn't expected to be used. Go to my second terminal, stop it, and start it. Okay, Medium articles API listing on port 3000. Let's see what happens when I refresh that. It's loading nothing. Okay, so back to Chrome and refresh that again. So okay, this is getting closer. So account set properly inner HTML of null means it did manage to at least get the data and transform it to JSON. So let's have a look at main.ts and see what it was that I did wrong. Document.getElement by ID output. Let's just check that we did actually set something with. Oh, I didn't. I mistyped the name. So when I refresh now, hopefully I get nothing. So did I get the URL wrong for that? So base URL get post localhost 3000 / get posts. Let's try that out. Okay, so when that comes back, so I'm obviously doing something slightly wrong, because that JSON.stringify is the JSON that I get back. Let's have a look at what data looks like. So if I do console.log data.text, I guess I could read the text data. Now it might be that it's I'm not sure what it's coming back as. Oops, refresh. Comes back as a pending promise. That's funny. So the fetch is returning me a promise of type response. Response as a text. Okay, yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. So if I do an await in front of that, is that doable? Does that work? I might have to await it outside of the console. No, okay. So we've got a load of stuff there. That does look like JSON data. Is it just that I'm missing an await in front of data.json? That's probably what it is. If I just get rid of that. Oops, save and refresh. Hey, there we go. So now I've got an extension that just spits out the JSON for all of my posts. But really what I want to do is start filtering them and actually put something that looks a bit more reasonable. But I suspect that would be part 1.2 or maybe part 2 of this little adventure. I'm going to call that a night, and I'll hopefully be able to get a little bit further on with this next time. But it's quite easy there. I mean, the takeaway from this session for anyone who is watching is really just what I said in the first 5 minutes. You've got the Twitch developer rig that will kind of set you up a new project, and that new project might just consist to begin with of the a JSON file that has a bunch of config in it. Obviously, this is suited really to quite simple extensions, but all it really shows is that there's no magic to it, right? Once I hope there's no magic to it because I haven't finished this process, but once I've figured out the process of taking what I've developed here and putting it onto Twitch, I haven't had to write anything extremely complex. I'm writing it all in plain JavaScript. I could take that API and host that on something like Heroku, which would be, I could have one API that's serving up multiple extensions if I wanted to. So yeah, hopefully that kind of demystifies the process of kind of getting started with an extension. The other kind of starting project, the boilerplate with React, it does have a little bit more if you want to create a slightly more complex extension with things like authentication and to kind of really like hook into things that are happening in your stream. That's probably a better starting point, providing that you're comfortable with React. But there's nothing to stop you from going and learning a little bit from that boilerplate and then using something like Angular or Vue or Svelte or anything like that. It's not really too prescriptive. All it's really expecting is plain HTML and JavaScript, and any of those frameworks will give you that as your output. So yeah, I will definitely do this again. I'm going to do a bit of reading on the kind of next steps once I've kind of written my extension. I may do a little bit more work in the meantime on this, and then we'll kind of skip forward to the part where I've now got a finished extension and here's how you publish it. And I'll try and think of other interesting things that I can live stream. But for anyone that ends up watching this in the future, thank you for watching it, and I will be back. Bye.